AskReddit by Stolen Valor Slayer 69. What's the nicest thing a stranger has ever done for you? One day I was having a rough time, so I decided to sit in the park to cool myself down. A man who looked like he was in his 60s came up to me and started a conversation with me. During our conversation he was writing something on a paper. I didn't think much of it, but before he left he handed me that piece of paper and it said, "It was nice talking to you. You remind me of my son who was a sweetheart just like you." I just wanted to say never give up on yourself even if life gets hard, because I'm rooting for you, and that just made me tear up instantly, and ever since that day I've been giving it my all at life because of him. This made me tear up just reading it. One can only imagine the events that inspired that note. One time when I was training for a new truck driving job, the trainer noticed I just sat off to the side when it was lunchtime for everyone. That afternoon, he bought me lunch during a time when I didn't know where my next meal would come from. I'm forever appreciative for that gesture. I went to the store to buy my cat's last meal, her favorite wet food. She said I could just take it since it was one item. I was broke as hell, had my kid on my hip, and was going to be saying goodbye to my cat in 3 hours by myself, so I just stood up and thanked her and told her it was my cat's last meal. And she came up and hugged me for a while and I cried a little. I don't even cry in front of my family, but this woman gave me a safe space to be vulnerable. I wish my cat were still here. That's so sweet, man, made me shed a tear. I hate thinking about my cats not being here. I'm not ready for that. A friend and I, in our 20s, were babysitting a group of 5 kids under 10. Apparently, according to our waiter, an older couple noticed how well behaved the kids were being. Naturally good kids who liked us plus pancakes equals good behavior. The couple covered our bill and amp. When we went to give the waiter a tip, he said not to worry because they tipped 25%. Had to have been an extra $100 at least. We were shocked and so sad we couldn't find them when we left. I was moving out of an apartment after a horrible abusive relationship had ended with an ex. The relationship really broke me and my view of people. The building had a doorman and he watched me make multiple trips with all of my belongings from the apartment down to my tiny car. By the end of it I was both physically and mentally exhausted, and I started tearing up after the last trip because I knew it was the last time I'd ever be in that place. The doorman just looked at me and told me, "I hope things work out for you, kid," and that just kinda restored my faith in humanity. I was taking a pre-employment drug test and eated my fake stuff too much. The guy administering the test told me I would be dead if that came from my body, then passed me anyway. This was to go from working temp for $8.25 per hour to full-time for $20 plus. What a homie. Traveling with a heavy backpack. Ordered the cheapest thing on the menu at a cafe after getting off the train. Waiter comes out when I'm done and says, "Hey, see that truck pulling out of the lot? That guy saw you and said he had lost a son who used to travel with a big pack, and he paid for your food. In fact, he left enough for dessert." Best coffee I've ever had. Cutting onions while reading this. Helped me load onto a plane with a baby, my carry-ons, and a car seat. I was traveling home from my grandpa's funeral when I found out that my plane was delayed. My infant was cranky and needed a nap, which I had hoped would happen when we got on the plane. I was by myself and about in tears. A woman and her husband offered help, and then when the time came, got us settled in the plane. The baby was out within minutes of takeoff. I've shared this story before, but it's one of my favorites. When I was pregnant with my daughter, my ex and I were looking around for a new place to live. We found a private rental and the landlord asked me when she was showing us around the place if I knew what I was having. I told her we were having a girl. When we moved in, the room for the nursery had been painted pink, and beautiful pink block-out curtains had been added. The day we moved out, she also came over to help me pack and clean. Just a genuinely beautiful human who showed me so much kindness. I got a flat tire and parked in an empty lot near a restaurant to put on the spare. I was in HS, so I hadn't done it before. I was able to figure it out, but it took quite a long time. Evidently, someone took notice, and she came over to ask if I was okay. I said yes, and she said, I figured you might be working up an appetite, so I got you a meal from the drive-thru. It was a cheeseburger with everything on the side since she wasn't sure what I'd want on it. Now, anytime I go to that restaurant, I order the cheeseburger with everything on it, as I really enjoyed it, and it reminds me of that stranger's act of kindness. I was walking into a store with my husband once with an older couple in front of us. The gentleman held the door for us, I said thanks, and we went on our way. It was around Christmas time and the store was fairly busy. At one point the couple was in an aisle we needed down. He apologized and I told him no problem at all and to take his time. For some reason he reminded me of my grandpa. My grandpa passed a few years ago and I missed him so much, especially around the holidays. The man looks at me and asks if I'd like a rose. I didn't know what he was talking about but said I'd love one. He pulled out a wooden rose about the size of my palm that he hand carved. He said he likes to carve them and hand them out to strangers to try and brighten their days. I turned it over and on the back was the man's name and the date he carved it. The date was my grandpa's birthday. Took everything in me too. Well, I'll cry for you. Probably not the nicest, but it's the most recently nicest. I was in the self-checkout line at a grocery store that was really long with a heavy basket full of food in one hand and a case of soda in the other. This older woman in front of me instantly offered for me to put the soda in her cart so I didn't have to carry it without hesitating at all. She then let me go in front of her too so I didn't have to carry it as long. She was so casual about her kindness it really got to me. I cried in the car driving home. This reminds me of the few times I've just had one item and people are letting me go in front. My mom had an operation and we asked for donations. Most of them are from people we know, but those who I totally don't know decided to throw in a hefty amount and even sent an uplifting message to me. In our economy, their donation is literally a day's worth of their salary. So, thank you, random citizens. Deleted. Pay it forward, if you're doing okay, look. For someone that needs it like you did and show them some kindness. I was jumped by the bully girls at school. My hair was a mess, clothes ripped, my purse lost. A older gent talking to a taxi driver noticed me and asked if I was okay. Sobbing, I explained. He gave the taxi driver £20 and said, take this lass home, tell your mum everything. I protested but he said please, I had a daughter once. I have never forgot that kind gent and still watch for him in crowds. I live in a small town and have never seen him or that taxi again. He stuck up for me in the sauna. Some fat old guy was talking at me, objectifying me in front of all the other people in the sauna. I felt scared and uncomfortable. He was commenting on my body, how I could improve, etc. No one was entertaining him. I think enough people got fed up because this very strong man, small but fit, spoke up and told the man that my shape is fine and that he shouldn't talk about me that way. The fat guy then said that if I don't do this I could get hurt by a weird man. Strange thing to say. I was visibly uncomfortable and was ready to get stuff. However, the nice man stuck up for me and said I am a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu master, and I also teach women only. She's fine. Something about this interaction was one of the nicest things I ever received. A few weeks later I called my insurance company for a therapist recommendation. I called the person, and I had my first session to see if we were a good fit. Turns out it was the man from the sauna. So not only did he stick up for me, but now he's been teaching me for years how to stick up for myself. What are the odds? Gave me over $2,000 over a period of 8 months that I was receiving chemo treatments. I was in China for a sort of cultural exchange. I'm ethnic Chinese but I know jack shit Mandarin. Anyway, during this time, my dad flew over to visit and he stayed at a hotel. To get to his hotel from our homestay, I had to take a bus or a couple of buses, so I asked my local partner for help. Well, it turns out the directions she gave was wrong. The bus no longer stops at the stop she specified. I was already on the bus when this happened, and it was at night time. Panicking, I randomly asked this couple with as much broken Chinese as I could muster how to get to the hotel. Somehow they understood and told me it's the last stop. So like, alright, I'm good. Turns out they also get off at the last stop. The nice part was they accompanied me to the hotel from the bus stop, even though I learned that their direction was in the opposite. It's a small thing, but for someone in a strange land who barely speaks the language, that act of kindness resonated well with me. Walked into a store to buy some candy, realized I forgot my wallet in my car. Told the guy behind the counter I would be right back, but the next person in line paid for it. IDK their name, but I'll get them back one day. Pay it forward, not back. I use a cane, and people can't get to the door fast enough to hold it for me. Chivalry is alive and well. I'm youngish and sometimes use a cane and people will give up seats on subways. Humanity is okay sometimes. When I was 10-11 I had flat tires on my bike while out on a shop run for my family, and the guys at the hardware store replaced the inner tubes for free. A woman fed me while I was sitting at the bus station, while she repeatedly told me to get better. She didn't speak my language, so it was mostly just her shoving her food into my hands and offering me hot coffee, because she saw that my own bottle was empty. I was indeed struggling with my eating habits back then, but not to the point where it was visible, and I was dressed up and looked pretty well off, so I'm not sure why she would choose to hand me her snacks when there was quite literally a homeless guy just a few meters from us, but she was such a sweetheart, and it continues to make me smile. On a regional train from Milan to Genoa, super crowded and 5 or 6 hours as I recall. My first time traveling alone and going to Europe on a Eurail pass. An elderly Italian gentleman struck up a conversation with me and we talked for hours. He shared with me that he had a son that had passed away who was similar in age to me. We connected. When we arrived in Genoa, he insisted on buying me a proper espresso and walking me to my lodging for the evening. He never asked for anything, just thanked me profusely for the conversation and that I reminded him of his son. To this day, I wish I would have stayed in touch. Told me I could take the 12-piece Chick-fil-A nuggets for free when my debit card was declined as a teenager. That's so sweet. A guy working the drive-thru at a Mexican restaurant used to give me a free horchata when my aunt and I were regulars in my elementary middle school years.